Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So please turn off your microphones now. Thank you. Now I'll be teaching you all number theory as you already know about it. So today I'll be discussing like what number theory deals with and why are we studying number theory. Today I'll be not be going into the syllabus much, but I'll be giving you the problems that we deal in number theory. Okay. Now we should first define like what do we study in number theory, right? So number theory is the study of properties of numbers. Okay, where by numbers I mean integers, okay, or specifically positive integers. So throughout this course we'll be dealing with the properties of numbers. We'll be proving the relationships between few different kinds of numbers, and mostly we'll be interested in the positive numbers or positive integers most precisely. Okay. Now the main goal of number theory, I'll just tell you what is the main goal of number theory. Like basically here we will see relationships between different kinds of number. Okay, we'll see the relationship between different types of numbers and we'll try to prove whether these relationships are true or not. Okay, so let me describe few typical number theory problems. Number one, okay, let me give you one example. Like, can the sum of two perfect squares be a perfect square? This is the question. That is, what I mean to say is, that is, does there exist non-zero a, b, c over integers such that a square plus b square equals to c square? This is the question. I am not considering a, b as c as 0 because that is trivially true. 0 square plus 0 square equals to 0 square. But my question is, other than these 0, 0, 0, is there any other solution to this?
Yes.
So can you answer me?
3 square plus 4 square plus 5 square.
Yeah, very good. So definitely that means one solution being 3, 4 and 5, because you know 3 square plus 4 square equals to 5 square, right? Not only this, there are actually other solutions also, like 5, 12 and 13 is another solution. And there are actually infinitely many solutions to this. And we all have done this in our lower classes. This is something called as Pythagoras theorem. And such a pair satisfying this relation is called as, so this is one example of Pythagorean triplet or triple. So we know this, right? There exist actually infinitely many solutions to this equation. Now let me ask you another thing. Let me extend this. here I was talking about perfect squares. Now I'm talking about can the sum of two cubes be a cube? This is another question. That is, does there exist non-zero a, b, c over z such that a cube plus b cube equals to c cube? I'm not considering again the zero case, because 0 cube plus 0 cube equals to 0 cube, and even if one of them is 0, then also this will be true, because a cube plus 0 cube equals to a cube. So a is a solution. So can you think of any number which will satisfy this a cube plus b cube equals to c cube? It is a bit difficult to think, right? Like the sum of two cubes again a cube. So let me extend further. Can the sum of two fourth powers be a fourth power, right? Or more generally, can the sum of two nth power be a nth power? That is, does there exist a, b, c over integers, definitely non-zero, okay, non-zero, such that a to the power n plus b to the power n equals to c to the power n, and where n belongs to this set. N can be 3, as I said. For 1 we know this is possible, right? For 2, which was Pythagoras theorem, from 3 onwards we have a question like, can the sum of two cubes be a cube, sum of two fourth power be a fourth power, or sum of 200 power will be a 100 power? So is there any solution to this kind of equations? Can you find one? The answer is no. The answer is no. Whenever we take n to be 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on, you cannot find any non-trivial solutions to this equation. This was stated by Fermat, Pierre de Fermat, and is known as Fermat's last theorem. So Fermat's last theorem states that there does not exist non-trivial solution to this equation where n is 3, 4, 5, 6 or so on. Okay, so this was stated by Fermat in 1637, but Fermat was not able to prove it. Okay, so this was proved by Andrew John Wiles in 1995. So just imagine, this problem was unsolved for more than 300 years. Are you getting my point? So this was the first kind of problem that I told you. Now let me take another question that we will deal in number theory. Prime numbers. You all know what is a prime number?
Yes, sir.
What is a prime number?
Exactly, it is one that a number that has exactly two factors.
Right, correct, very good. So a prime number P is a number having exactly two factors. Okay, 1 and P itself. So this we all know about prime numbers, but there are many questions relating to prime numbers. Achha, let me give you a few examples of prime number. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and there are many others, right? Now the first question. Are there infinitely many primes? So this is the first question. Are the number of primes infinite, or they stop after some time? Like the collection of all prime numbers, is it a infinite collection or a finite collection? So this is one question to answer, right? Second question. Are there infinitely many primes which on divisible by 4 leaves a remainder 1? This is second question. Like, what are which prime numbers will leave remainder 1 on divisible by 4? Like one example is 5, right? Because 5 is a prime first of all, and on divisible by 4 will leave the remainder 1. Another one being 13. 13 is when divided by 4 will leave the remainder 1. So my question is this collection infinite? All those prime numbers which when divisible by 4 leaves the remainder 1. Similarly, if I ask you, are there infinitely many prime numbers which are divisible by 4 leaves the remainder 3? Like that will include what? 7, 11 and so on. So are these all collections infinite, or this collections finite? So again, this is a typical problem that we will do in our course, and will prove all these facts that yes, the answer to all of these questions is yes. There are infinitely many prime numbers. There are infinitely many primes which are divisible by 4 leaves the remainder 1. So the answer is yes. So this is second type of problem that we do in number theory. Okay. Okay, now let me give you one last interesting puzzle to deal with. Okay, this puzzle was given by Mahavira, an Indian astronomer and mathematician. Mahavira's puzzle. Now, what was the puzzle? Let me write the puzzle, okay? There were 63 heaps of fruits. You know, heaps, that means a collection of fruits. So there were 63 equal heaps of. So let me write the question first. There were 63 equal heaps of fruits together with 7 single fruit. Okay, these were to be equally distributed among 23 travelsmen Okay. So tell me the number of fruits in each sheep. So this was a puzzle like given by Mahavira. Like what is the puzzle? I'll exactly tell you. There was 63 equal heaps of fruits. So heaps means like some kind of collection. So there were like this heaps of fruits containing some fruits, right? And this was 63 number. This heaps was 63 number, and along with 7 fruits, 7 single fruits of the same kind. So these were to be distributed among 23 travelsmen. So there were 23 travelsmen. Okay, you have to distribute these fruits among 23 travelsmen equally. So tell me, what was the number of fruits in each heap? Okay, what was the number of fruits in each heap? That is the question. Now, how to solve it? We'll see. I'll try to frame this algebraically. Okay, how do you start? Call the number of let the number of fruits in each heap be x. So let the number of fruits in each heap be x. Therefore, total number of fruits. Who can tell me what is the total number of fruits then? If I assume the number of fruits in each heap to be x, what is the total number of fruits? Have you got my question? Each heap has x fruits.
That's 7.
No. What is the total number of fruits?
63x.
Just 63x, something more.
Plus 7. Plus 7x.
Not 7x, just 7, because 7 single fruits. They were not in the heaps, right? There was just 7 single fruits. So the total number of fruits being 63x plus 7. I hope you are clear with this, right? So x number of fruits here, x number of fruits here, and there was 63 and all. So 63 times x and plus 7 single fruits. Okay, now let me assume one more thing. Let the number of fruits given to each travelsman be y. Okay, so again, what is the total number of fruits then in terms of y? Very good, 23y, right? So definitely, let me write it. So definitely, this being same number of fruits, so therefore 63x plus 7 must equal 23y, right? Do you agree? Because this is also the number of fruits, total number of fruits, and this is also the total number of fruits, so they must be equal. Or writing more formally, this will be 63x minus 23y equals to minus 7, right? So we have to solve this equation for x and y, where x and y are positive integers. Definitely number of fruits cannot be negative, so x and y are positive integers. So this is the algebraic form of Mahavira's puzzle. So that means you have to solve this kind of problem or this equation. So you see, this equation is of the form ax plus by equals to c, right? Where a is 63, b is minus 23 and c is minus 7. So this kind of equation where a, b, c are constants, or I should say are integers. Okay, this kind of problems where a, b, c are integers and we have to solve for x and y in integers is called a linear Diophantine equation. Okay, so such an equation of this form ax plus by equals to c, where a, b, c are integers, is called a linear Diophantine equation. So even to solve Mahavira's puzzle, we have to solve a linear Diophantine equation, right? So again I'll repeat what is the meaning of linear Diophantine equation. An equation of the form ax plus by equals to c, where the answers x and y, where the solutions x and y must be integers. So such an equation is called as linear Diophantine equation. So let me ask you a few questions regarding linear Diophantine equation. First question, does every, in short form I'll be calling this as LDE, linear Diophantine equation. So does every linear Diophantine equation have a solution? That is the first question. Like, given any equation of this form, will you always find some x and y in integers satisfying this equation? Think of it. Got my point? Like, if I give you any equation, like suppose 2x plus 3y equals to 5, so will it always have a solution? That is my question.
Yes, sir.
Actually, the answer is no. I'll give you example. So the answer is no. Why no? You see, you consider this Diophantine equation. 2x plus 4y equals to 3. This is definitely a Diophantine equation because this is clearly of the form ax plus by equals to c. Now you see one thing, whatever value of x you put here, this is always going to remain even. Right, because 2 times any number will again be an even number. Similarly, whatever y you input here, this is again going to be even, and the sum of 2 even numbers will again be even. So the left hand side is always going to be even, but the right hand side is always odd. 3 is an odd number. So will this have a solution? Definitely no, because whatever x and y you input, the left hand side is going to be always even, but the right hand side is odd. So the answer to this question is no, that there are some LDEs which have no solution. Got my point? Now the second question. So under what conditions conditions will an LDE have a solution? So this is the second question, right? Like, not all LDEs have a solution. So what is the second question? That under what conditions will an LDE have a solution? Getting my point? What conditions or condition must an LDE satisfy to to have a solution? And the third obvious question, what is the maximum number of solutions? What is the maximum number of solutions? Will it be finite or infinite or just one solution? That is the third question. So talking about LDs, we have 3 questions. One, it may or may not have a solution. Then the second question is, under what condition or conditions will an LD have a solution? And the third question, what is the maximum number of solutions to will an LD have? Got my point? So this all were the questions to deal with. So I will not be answering these questions right now. Okay, we'll be studying LD in our number theory course. So I'll be telling the answer to every question later on, but I just gave an introduction about LD. So now coming back to Mahavira's problem. Okay, now Mahavira's problem was 63x minus 23y is equals to minus 7. So one solution being, we'll solve it later on. I'll just give you the solution now. One solution was x equals to 5 and y equals to 14. So this will satisfy this given equation. I'm not discussing the method of solving now, but we'll do it later on. I'm just giving one solution. So there exists a solution to Mahavira's problem. Not only that, even x equals to 28 and y equals to 77 most probably is again another solution. And interestingly, there are many solutions to Mahavira's problem. Suppose I have 9 slices of cake to distribute among 4 people equally. Okay, suppose I want to distribute 9 slices of cake equally among 4 people. So how can you do it? You cannot further break the slice. So the obvious answer being, you will provide with 2 slices to each person, right? And from here what I can write is 9 slices can be rewritten as 4 into 2 slices. That will give me 8 slices. So I have distributed 8 slices plus 1 extra slice. Okay, or I can write 9 as 4 into 2 plus 1, more formally, right? Now one thing to notice here, that this number should be less than the number of people. Why? Because if this quantity is actually more than the number of people, then I can again distribute those pieces to the people, right? So one thing to note is, this number should always be less than the number of people. So let me give a very generalized version of this. Suppose I have A slices and to be distributed among B people. Okay, I want to distribute A slices to B people. Definitely B should be greater than 0 and A is also greater than 0, but for the time being I am not considering that case. So the question is just like this: can I write A as B into Q plus R, and this R is actually greater or equal to 0 and should be less than the number of people, that is B. So the first question, will this Q and R always exist? So I have the first question of existence. Okay, I have the first question of existence, and secondly, will this be unique for a particular integers A and B? Will Q and R unique? So second question is of uniqueness of Q and R. Getting my point? So we have 2 problems now. One is of existence of this integers Q and R for any integer A and B, and secondly is of uniqueness. If they exist, then what about Q and R? Will they be unique? That means, can 9 be represented in terms of 4 in any other way, satisfying this condition? All these answers to the questions will be given by the division algorithm. So we have the first basic theorem, something called as division algorithm. Okay, now what is the meaning, like what is the statement? So let me give you the statement. Given any integers A and B is greater than 0. If B is greater than 0, A can be anything, so B is greater than 0. There exists unique integers Q and R such that A can be written as BQ plus R. Okay, provided R is greater or equals to 0, less than B. So the existence and uniqueness will both be guaranteed by the division algorithm. You see, the division algorithm says that there exist Q and R. First it talks about the existence, and secondly it talks about the uniqueness of this integers q and r. So today being your first class in this course, I will not do the proof of this theorem as you are new to this topic. Tomorrow we will do the proof of this theorem. Today I'll show you some applications of this division algorithm. Okay, so what is the application? Like suppose a is any integer. Suppose a is any integer and take b to be 2. So by division algorithm, there exist q and r in z such that, what will division algorithm says, a can be written as 2 times q plus r, and r will satisfy greater or equals to 0 less than 2, right? So what are the possible values of r from here? R being an integer and r must satisfy this condition. So only integers satisfying this is r equals to 0 and r equals to 1, right? Because what are the integers lying between 0 and 2 including 0? That means 0 or 1. Only two values of r. So when r equals to 0, so a can be written in the form 2q, and when r equals to 1, a can be written in the form 2q plus 1. Getting my point? So any integer is either of the form 2q or 2q plus 1. We call this integer as an even integer and call this one as an odd integer. So this division algorithm provides a very good example of like motivating even and odd numbers, right? Why they were defined. Got my point? Now another very interesting question is this. The square of any integer is of the form 4k or 4k plus 1. So this is one of the very interesting question that you have to answer, or that we have to answer. What is the question? That you take any integer, you square that integer, it is either of the form 4k, that is it is completely divisible by 4, or the number when divided by 4 will leave a remainder 1. Getting my point? So you understand my point very carefully. Suppose a is any integer. Okay, then from above we know a is of the form either 2q or of the form 2q plus 1, right? Because by division algorithm only two forms are possible, either 2q or 2q plus 1, right? Now let me square it. A square will be 2q whole square, which is 4q square, which is 4 times k, where k is q square, and a square is 2q plus 1 whole square, that is 4q square plus 4q plus 1, which actually means if I take 4 common from the first two terms, and which means 4k plus 1, where k is of the form q square plus q. So from here we understood one thing, that the square of any integer is either divisible by 4 or leaves the remainder 1 on divisible by 4. So from here we can conclude that, so this is the proof, right? So from here we can conclude that any integer which is not of this form cannot be a perfect square. So any integer which on divisible by 4 leaves 2 or 3 as a remainder. Any integer which on divisible by 4 leaves 2 or 3 as a remainder cannot be a perfect square. Okay, cannot be a perfect square. So from here we can conclude this one, right? Because any perfect square integer is either of this form or of this form. So the one, if they are not of this form, they cannot be a perfect square. Remember one thing, it means that the square of any integer is of this form. It does not mean that if any number is of the form 4k, it is always a perfect square. This is not the case. For example, 32, that is 4 into 8, but that is not a perfect square. But if it is a square integer, it will satisfy these two conditions, this or this, right? Okay, so I am clear with this note. So a very interesting question that will come now is 111 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 etc. These numbers cannot be a perfect square. Cannot be perfect squares. This is obvious question. Why? You know, when is a number divisible by 4? When the last two digits of the number is divisible by 4. Now look at the last two digits of any of these numbers is 11. So 11 and dividing by 4 leaves the remainder 3. So any number of this form is of the form 4 times k plus 3 or 4 times q plus 3, right? And from the previous note, this one, right? It cannot be a perfect square. So it cannot be a perfect square. Right? Okay. Now I'll give you a homework to do. Prove that the square of any odd integer is of the form 8k plus 1. That means the square of any odd integer is of the form this. Like for example, you see 3 square. 3 square is 9 and 9 is of the form 8 times 1 plus 1. Right? And take 5 square. 5 square is 25, which is the form 8 3 is 24 plus 1. So these are few examples which I showed you. But you have to prove in general. So I'll just give you hints to prove. Any integer a is of the form 4q plus 1, 4q plus 2 and 4q plus 3. Right? By division algorithm, if I divide a by 4, so either it will leave the remainder 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. But the question says it should be an odd integer. So what are the odd integers from here? 4q plus 1 and 4q plus 3. So just square them and show it that it is of the form 8k plus 1. Right? Okay. Now, we will study a very interesting case. So from division algorithm, A is of the form BQ plus R, where R is of the form greater or equal, where R satisfies this condition. Not equals to. So the interesting case being R equals to 0. Right? We are very much interested in this case when R equals to 0. Then in that case A can be written as BQ. So in this case we say that when R is 0, we say that B is a factor of A. we also say that A is a multiple of B. And there are many other terms used, like B is a factor of A. And we denote this mathematically as we write this B, a vertical line A. So this means that B divides A, or it means that B is a factor of A. So this vertical lines stands for divisible, or sorry, divides, not divisible. So B divides A. So this motivates our definition, right? We are interested in special case R equals to 0 when A can be written in the form BQ, and that motivates our definition. So let me give you a definition of divisible. So what is the definition? An integer A is said to be divisible by an integer B, and B cannot be 0. B can be negative, which I will discuss later on, but according to the division algorithm, B must be positive. But we will see an expanded version of division algorithm where B can be negative. So an integer A is said to be divisible by an integer B if A can be written as BQ. That means the remainder being 0 for some integer Q. And mathematically we write in symbols like this: B divides A. So this actually means A can be written as B times Q for some Q in Z. So these two are equivalent. Okay, B divides A, that means A can be written as B into Q. So let me give you some examples. So if I am writing like this, 5 divides 10, is it true? Yes, it is true, because 10 can be written as 5 times 2. Getting my point? Or let me give it back, right? So by definition, I can write this. So this is true. Now a very short thing to introduce, something like this. For this is a kind of theorem you can consider. For any integer A, number 1 divides A, number 2, A divides 0, and A should not be 0 in this case, and number 3, A divides A, and A should not be 0 here also. Now why this is true? Obviously just apply the definition. 1 divides A, when can I say 1 divides A? When A can be written as 1 times something, and that something can be chosen as A. So from this actually implies this, and this is both side true, right? Why is this true? See, why I am taking A not equals to 0? Because the divisor cannot be 0. So here A being the divisor cannot be 0. So why is this true? Because 0 can be written as A times 0, right? So, and why is this one true? Because A can be written as A times 1. So this was just some applications of division algorithm. We will do the proof of division algorithm tomorrow. If you have any doubts, you can ask me in the next class. Thank you.